All right, I think I finally figured it out. Welcome back. You are on the Fringe with Gavin and me, Dave. So, we are coming at you guys with another podcast about our Peace Corps experience. And today we're going to actually be talking more about what we did in Peace Corps. And before we even get going with this, I would like to give a warm selamat datang, a warm welcome to the new Peace Corps trainees that just arrived in Indonesia. So congratulations to you guys. You guys are going to do awesome work. And I hope at some point in the next couple of years, I'll be able to meet up with you guys and see what's going on in your communities and at your sites and everything else. So best of luck to you all over the next 2.5 years, and you guys are going to do incredible and amazing things.
Here, here, Dave. Here, here.
So, today we are going to talk more about Peace Corps and more about what we actually do as Peace Corps volunteers. And, mhm.
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, so I guess before I even jump into that, a little bit more about the three main goals of Peace Corps. So anybody that goes into Peace Corps, regardless of what sector you serve in, whether you're teaching, whether you're helping farmers, whether you're helping small businesses, whether you're helping kids, you're doing three things. So first, you're trying to help the country that you're in with problems that it needs to solve. So you've been invited there by that country to help them solve problems that they see are important to their citizens and to the government and to the social society of that country. And then you're there to primarily do cultural exchange, so learn about their culture and bring America to that country and share about the US, not only your experiences, but also other experiences from other Peace Corps volunteers. And then last, once you go back home, share some of that country with Americans and try to incorporate things that you learn and things that you do into your daily life. So the whole key to this is more about sustainability, where you're trying to build relationships with people and you're trying to do projects and do things that are more sustainable. And that's the key S word that everybody talks about in Peace Corps from the first day you get there until the day you leave, till COS. Everybody talks about sustainability and how important it is. And primarily, the best way to do this is just talk to people, build relationships, eat the food, show up, and have a really good time.
That's also a good way to talk about the other S word, but let's not get into that right now.
Yeah, that,
Uh,
that that other S word is another very common word that you're
oh,
probably
that's pretty ever present. Pretty ever
yeah,
present. You're only ever
yeah,
one sentence away from talking about it. Let me tell you that.
yes, yes you are. And if you're not by the first or second week, then you're probably not really in Peace Corps.
Well, I mean, we always used to talk about the brown badge of courage. Um,
We did brown
we
stripe
did.
and yellow stripe.
We had no stars though. Um,
No, and no
no.
dignity. Dignity got left behind long, long time ago.
Dignity was not a really part of the process. So I guess, I mean, Dave just went very appropriately technical and talked about, really the sort of nuts and bolts theory of what you do as a Peace Corps volunteer. I was much more reductive and I was like, oh, we're going to talk about what we did on like a daily basis and like what the routine would be.
Oh, and we're gonna 100% jump into that too.
Yeah,
100% we're jumping into that.
yeah.
That's the whole
And
key of what everybody wants to hear.
I, well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, as Dave does know this, I think. I mean, I did this on a TV program now almost 10 years ago um, for Indonesian regional television. And it was like day in the life of a Peace Corps volunteer for people who obviously, this was all in Bahasa Indonesia. No one knew what a Peace Corps volunteer was. So it was like I had a film crew follow me around all day uh, in in a, in a
I did
life
not
of,
know this. You never told me this, dude.
I never told you this.
No, I
Oh
had
my
no
god!
idea this happened.
I'll send you the link, man. I'm sure. I'm
I'll
sure
post it.
I
I'll post it
should.
on the Substack and post it online too if you want. So you can
No, no,
get.
you're not doing that. No, you're not doing that. No, because like then I would have to go back because then there are like comments on it, and I purposely
Ah,
don't read those comments because there's a lot of like, what the hell is he doing here kind of a thing. It's also
that
people
kind
who
of
are
thing.
like genuinely puzzled by my presence. And I
Well,
was pretty puzzled by my presence too. Um,
well, Gavin, I have to say, yeah, that's pretty much the whole notion of Peace Corps. Is a lot of it, you're just pretty much like, what am I doing here? And everybody else is pretty much like, what are you doing here? And it's just, I don't
pretty
know.
much.
I'm just
I
showing
think it
up.
was I think it was a moderate, yeah, no, 100%. I think it was a moderate success in that no one was like, this is a really terrible idea. And it seemed to be relatively popular. I kept getting very random friend requests over like the next 5 years, I think, from people who saw it on
Oh,
TV.
interesting.
Oh, it was the whole thing. I also don't look at it very much because I am like rail thin. I am painfully thin in this. And that's because for men, this isn't always true for women. For men, particularly in Indonesia, just because of the diet and because of the climate and because of, I think, the stress of moving, you lose a ridiculous amount of weight in your first couple of months. And I was already, like, I've beefed up a little bit. I was a very skinny guy. I went into the Peace Corps and I mean, conservatively lost like probably 30 to 40 pounds within a month. It was not pretty to look at. I mean, I looked like someone had attacked me with a vacuum cleaner somehow. Um, so there's
Yeah,
that.
and
But yeah, that
I
was
will
very
second
much
that too.
he gets up, he does his Mondi. I think the first thing to talk about is, at least with regards to Indonesia, uh, bathing is kind of a different thing altogether. Because
Oh,
I would quote
bathing
unquote
is
have a bath like 3 to 4 times a day, but it wasn't a bath like I'm not getting into a tub. I'm not, putting the Epsom salts in. It's nothing like that. It's you basically have a ceramic cistern built into the wall that you fill up with a tap, and you take a small plastic bucket, scoop bucket, whatever you want to call it. That's what it is. And you scoop the water over yourself, and you get your soap and your shampoo and your whatnot, and that's a Mondi. And you would
hmm
do that where I was. I kind of had to do that at least 3 times a day because otherwise you're sweating the whole time. I was literally living on the edge of a mangrove swamp. You were sweating all the time. Uh, you're gonna have skin problems. So yeah, you would want to bathe at least 3 times a day, 4 times in the hot season. And no, didn't have a shower. No shower head. That's not really a thing out there. No, it wasn't hot water. You wouldn't have wanted hot water.
hmm
it wasn't mountain fresh. It wasn't super cool, but it wasn't hot. Um, and it could be
And a lot
quite
of the water too, a lot of the water too just sits in the cistern. So it just sits there and waits, and you can turn it on. Generally, a lot of Indonesians will collect water from rain and it'll
yeah.
sit in a big tub on the roof. And if they have a really dry, rainy season, then they might not have a lot of water. And depending on where you are, you might have access to some kind of well water or some kind of community water, but a lot of people will primarily use rainwater. So it can limit the quality of your Mondi and it can limit the length of your Mondi too.
Yeah, or river water, which I mean in most of Indonesia is not,
Yes.
you don't really want that.
No, you
And
don't.
yeah, I would always like see guys bathing in the creek, and I'm like, do you know how much agricultural runoff is in that? Like, I'm surprised
Yeah.
any of you are still alive. But there's not a lot of awareness of that kind of thing. It In one of the houses I stayed in, they had fish in the Mandi, um, which
Ooh.
was which sounds terrible, until you realize that they actually kept the Mondi relatively clean
They're
because
gonna eat the mosquito larvae and stuff, right?
they eat mosquito larvae, they eat algae too. So
Ooh.
if any kind of algae or fungi were to form, which does happen sometimes, they would keep that in check. And yes, it would also keep the insects in check because mosquito larvae, in a part of the world where dengue is completely endemic and malaria is around, yeah, you don't want to get either. So no, I did, but you kind of had to be careful then because you were always afraid you were going to scoop one of them up and like pour it over you, and then you would kill like I think they were goldfish. You didn't want to
Mm,
do that, so you had to be a little careful.
no.
So you Mondi, you get dressed. I Dave, did you wear a lot of traditional dress? Did you put on a sarong every morning?
No, believe it or not, I think I put on a sarong once or twice, but I would
Uh-huh.
rock the batik. So
Oh
generally
yeah,
in
got to.
Indonesia, men will wear batik, and it's a traditional pattern, and they have different types of batik from different parts of Indonesia. The heart of it is down around Central Java, around Yogyakarta, Solo. But you go down there, or if you're in Indonesia, get yourself a batik shirt or get yourself, some kind of batik clothing. Because it is a very cool souvenir, and it's actually very cool as well in terms of like temperature regulation. I never got hot wearing a batik shirt, which is weird.
No,
And everything else in a regular cotton shirt, I would be sweating like crazy. But when I would wear just a batik shirt, I really didn't get that hot. But
it's
would wear a
surprisingly
batik
breathable.
shirt. Yeah, it really is. It's a very, very cool, unintended material.
And I mean, I think you know this, but I absolutely love batik, and I still have a couple nice batik shirts, and I like patterns generally, but there's something very, very nice about the batik you get in Indonesia, and of course, every village basically has their own pattern, and
Yeah.
you can get
You can
really,
tell where the
really
batik comes from based on the pattern.
yes. And so yeah, now you would wear the batik. I didn't get my school had a uniform, and they would threaten to make me one now and again. I had to
Mhm.
wear throughout most of the week. I would be wearing the standard white shirt, black pants, which
Okay.
pretty standard
The
uniform.
Jokowi.
The Jokowi that was brought in by the outgoing Indonesian president, um, who was sort of famous for wearing white shirt, black pants. That was his uniform. That kind of became unofficial civil service uniform for a little bit. But the standard teacher uniform at my school was khaki shirt, khaki pants, which
Hmm.
were not breathable and were completely hideous. And it certainly made it made all the men look like really horribly aged Boy Scouts in like the
Yeah.
worst possible way. I mean, it just was not flattering from any angle. Thankfully, I never had to wear
Generally,
that.
the shirts were oversized too. My school made me one of those, and mine was green. So I had like a kind of a really
Oh,
nasty puke green colored shirt that I wore and pants. The pants were actually I fit into them because they made them too small, and then I lost weight, and then I fit into my pants. But
see,
but
see, everyone
but
loses weight. But yeah,
seriously, I lost a lot, but and I was skinny to begin with. But seriously, the school uniform that I had was pretty unappetizing. It was pretty gross, but still,
it
I
is.
would wear it, and it makes a difference in terms of you trying to fit into the school. Where if you dress up like everybody else, then you're part of the team, and you're just like all the other teachers, and you're just kind of fitting in. You're sama with everybody. Sama sama. It's kind of same in Indonesian, and it's a reply for thank you, but it's also like we're same, we're together, and it's a big part of the culture down there.
Oh my God. And as we've talked about, like solidarity is so important and uniformity. And
Hmm.
yeah, I didn't really gel to that too well. I mean, so I did, I think on this day, On the day they filmed, I did wear a sarong. I actually did wear the sarong quite a bit, like the first couple of months, and then I just stopped because it was like I just couldn't get into it. I mean, I was also they showed up in like the middle of me doing the funeral prayers. So
Oh man.
yeah, because I had a whole unfortunately, similar to a lot of volunteers, I showed up and the woman who I was staying with, the matriarch of the family, died within about a month of me showing up. And that was just this incredibly traumatic experience in all kinds of ways. I stayed with the family, but because she had been an important religious figure in the community, they then had to do 60 days of funerary rites, which were pretty intense. I was there for every day. I was there for the whole thing. I was very involved, and again, it's the importance of community engagement. I could have shown up and gone. I barely knew this woman. We didn't really get along. I didn't really want to be doing this, but I absolutely felt like I owed it to her. I owed it to the family, and importantly, I owed it to the community. And even though things were up and down after that point, uh, people remembered that I had committed to that I had been there for the community and for the family. And that was really seen as an incredibly good thing. I got respect for that. Um, and it was quite, I think I talked about this with you, Dave. It was actually very cathartic, and it did help me sort of process a lot of how I was feeling about it. Again, incredible feeling of solidarity. You're there with, on average, be 100 and 120 guys sitting in the courtyard, um, chanting prayers for about 15, 20 minutes, and then breaking fast together and eating a communal meal. It was something that obviously was not typical. That was not typical, but that's the sort of thing that does crop up. It does crop up with
Hmm.
service, and you roll with the punches and you try to deal with it as much as you can. So I've gotten up, I've mondied, I've gotten dressed. Uh, I'll be eating breakfast with the family usually. Um, I wouldn't have Kopi until I got to school, so I would just be eating breakfast. What does breakfast look like? Well, I can tell you immediately what's going to be on the menu. There's going to be rice, be steamed white rice. There's going to be some kind of stir-fried vegetable, like kind of a bok choy or a leafy green. Always, it's going to be stir-fried in some kind of fish sauce with a lot of garlic. Uh, you're going to
Hmm.
have You're going to have fried tempeh. You're going to have sliced varying widths. You're going to have fried tempeh. You're going to have a fried egg, and you're going to have usually some kind of sambal, which is like the sort of chili salsa variety they got out there. So that would be breakfast. You'd eat a bowl of that if the family or whoever you were staying with, or you'd provision some bread the night before. They try to force some sweet bread on you, uh, and then you would get on your bicycle and go to school. Initially, I don't know about you, Dave. I forget where you were in relation to the school.
I was
I
far. I had to bike every day.
I mean, I would take my bike sometimes, but I never needed to because my first house was literally next to the school. So you would get up and you would walk. And of course, the hilarity was one of the kids that I was staying with went to my school. He would ride his motorcycle. He was 12 years old. He would ride his motorcycle to school every day. It was literally 50 meters from uh, the driveway to the school. It was stupidly close. He would always drive his motorcycle. I would walk. I would get in. I had a desk in the teacher's room. Um, the way things work, I think this was probably true at your school as well. The way things work in
Hmm.
Indonesia is the kids stay in the same room all day, the teachers rotate.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you would have a desk in the teacher's office, which in my case was this giant room with like 40 desks crammed into it. And you would sort of, I mean, I feel like Indonesians invented hot desking a long time before people got around to it in the West. You just sort of, whoever hadn't shown up that day, you'd be like, okay, I'm taking Pak so and so's desk today. And
Yeah.
you would wait. And the reason you would wait would be because in Indonesia, they were very strict about you had to go to class with a co-teacher. You were not teaching a class by yourself. Now, different volunteers had a different attitude. I never went into a class by myself, really. I had four co-teachers, all of whom were really nice people, two of whom were reliable, kind of. And they would show up, but they all had like outside interests too. So I would say the guy I taught with the most, um, I mean, I'll just call him Pac S, the not that it matters, but he had like four different jobs outside of the school. So he was teaching at our school. He was teaching at another school about a mile away. He was an English tutor. He was a fisherman. He would make prawn crackers in season, and he was also a pomelo farmer. Uh,
This guy's
it
a master hustler.
which was so common in Madura. You would meet someone and it would be like, "What do you do?" And they would reel off, particularly a guy, but actually the women too. They would reel off like six different things they were doing, and you'd be like, "But I've been talking to you for like 3 hours, and we've just been talking and drinking coffee the whole time. You've like smoked half a pack of cigarettes. Um, you haven't done anything, but you just told me you're working like six different jobs." And this was very typical because Madura. I wouldn't say it's an inhospitable place, but it's not easy to make a living there. There's not a lot of economic opportunity. It doesn't have, it's not like Java in that it's not good farming. It's really difficult to make a living off of farming in Madura. So you're pretty much stuck with fishing, but that's not great either. So you really have to have as many sources of income as humanely possible. And man, people do. People would be duck farmers, they'd be rice farmers, they'd be fishermen, they'd be making prawn crackers, they'd be working in a masjid, they'd be tutoring people on math. You would be doing as many things as you. They'd be helping someone's cousin run a satay hut. I mean, it would. They'd just be doing all these things all the time because you need to. You're not going to make enough money off of one thing. And you also always need a fallback. So you would have plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you'd be doing them all at the same time. So because of that, not everyone showed up every day. And there were many days where I'd be like waiting to go to class, and it's just like, we don't, no one showed up today. Like we're really sorry. Also, what I found out about halfway through my first year was that they only wanted me teaching certain classes because the way they do differentiation in an Indonesian middle school is they put all the kids who do really well on tests into the first two classes. So you'd have class A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and classes A and B, those are the good kids. Those are the kids who do well on the tests. Those are the kids who don't talk back to the teachers. Those are the kids who like have been picked as they're going places. Uh, Kids in classes D and E, definitely F. those are the kids that literally you would be in the teacher's lounge and people would be like, well, I'm not teaching them. They're worthless. Like they don't do anything anyways. Uh, Ironically, the best classes I ever taught were with the D&E classes because one, I was novel because I didn't get to teach them very much. Two, they actually had a lot of energy and they were kind of interesting people. Whereas that's not really prioritized in the Indonesian education system. So if you have a bit of personality, if you are like very energetic, people really don't know what to do with you. And you kind of get pushed to the bottom of the system. So that was just a really bizarre dynamic. But again, didn't always get to class. I had one colleague who was had two kids while I was there in the course of 2 years. I had another colleague who also, his wife was pregnant. He was teaching another job. The only guy who was consistently there was absent for like 4 months one time because he was building at his retirement home. He was 7 years away from retirement and he just took 4 months off. They couldn't fire him because, again, if you're working at a state school in Indonesia, you're a civil servant. You are working for the Indonesian government directly. And once you're in the Indonesian civil service, firing you is virtually impossible. It's not impossible, but it's very close to impossible. You like have to be caught red-handed doing incredibly heinous shit to someone directly related to the president for them to even think about firing you. So
And too,
that's
if something happens, then they'll most likely just move you and they'll put
yeah.
you in a different position to where, okay, we're going to shuffle this guy over to some other position where he's not going to lose face and the system's not going to lose face.
And face
And
is so important.
that's just how Indonesia's system in terms of teaching too, where you have teachers that will come in the first couple of years, they're almost like volunteers where they'll come in, they'll work, they'll be contract workers, and they'll hustle to try to get a civil service position. And then once they get the civil service position and they're in, then they'll make it up as high as they can. But, after I would say 15, probably 10 to 15 years, if you're not going to be a principal or you're not going to be a vice principal or you're not going to be going somewhere else, then generally you might see a drop off in performance. And it's
I
not
think
all teachers, but in a lot of teachers.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty polite way of putting it. So yeah, and I definitely saw that. So if I went into the classroom, um, average class size for me was somewhere between 45, 65 kids. So these are really massive rooms. They're more halls than rooms. And you're trying to go through like basic phrases, try to get them to do some partner work, which was really hard. Try to get them
We
to,
should talk about our first lesson that we taught to the students in Malang at the school with all the Papuan students.
yeah, and that was a little different though,
Do you
'cause
remember that?
I do remember that because that was not a public school. That was a private Christian
Yeah, that was.
school.
Yep.
Uh, no, go ahead.
Okay. But I was going to say real quick. So in a lot of the English classes, there were specific phrases that the students would be tested on or the students needed to learn. And some of them were really obscure. And our first lesson that Gavin and I taught was about satisfaction and like, I am satisfied. Are you satisfied? And it was kind of strange. And it was something that was, I think we were teaching middle school kids. So it's a concept that Gavin and I could not talk about in Indonesian because our Indonesian was not good enough. So we basically just pantomime most of the class, and then we put on Rolling Stones, and we just played it for probably a minute, minute and a half. And we walked into the classroom and we said, "Okay, kids, so our key word today is satisfaction. We wrote the word satisfaction on the board. Said, okay, when you hear this word in the song, everybody stand up. And I played the song, and then it started up. And then the students were kind of sitting there like, what's going on? And the teacher was like, what's going on? And then I can't get no satisfaction. And then I just stood up. I can't, and I sat down. I can't get no satisfaction. I stood up. And then one other student heard it and stood up. And I was like, oh, this is genius. And we went back to the beginning and played it again and like had the kids listen to Rolling Stones. It was probably 5 or 10 minutes. We just did this on repeat from what I remember. And it was absolutely hilarious because we had no idea what we were doing in terms of
No, we
teaching,
really
but the students loved it, the teacher loved it, and they were like, you guys are so active and you're having fun. We're like, okay, cool. So most important thing for a lot of the classes in Indonesia, sorry to hijack this, is just going in there and being active and having fun with the students and trying to use English
my
as much
God,
as you
yeah.
can. So the students can see someone speaking and using the language, and it's not just something that's in a textbook that's completely foreign to them, tying it into stuff that they're interested in, whether it's music or sports or anything.
Yeah, and I mean, we were there for very practical reasons because that's genuinely what Dave just said is a massive issue in the Indonesian education system generally, but particularly with regards to English as a language. It just the way it's taught is so, I mean, I would hope it's improved since we've been there, but the way it was taught when we were there was so antiquated and so completely removed from the language where they focused that to be fair they focused on things that were important if you were a Bahasa Indonesia speaker, like the obvious example for me is always tenses. They were obsessed with teaching different past, present, perfect, all this stuff in English, and the reason why, and this will make sense, is because they don't have tenses in Bahasa Indonesia. There is no past, present, future. There are no tenses. Everything's contextual. So if you are an Indonesian speaker, I understand why you would focus on learning the tenses because they're the most confusing thing about the language in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But
And to be is
those,
also.
yeah, but those things get focused on to such an extent that they ignore that this is actually a language that people speak to each other. And so people would memorize phrases, and it was very much a rote memorization system. People would memorize various phrases, but they wouldn't really understand how to use them in an actual conversation. And there was a general lack of confidence because you just didn't have anyone to practice the language with, really. So that's where the volunteers come in.
Yep. And it was for some teachers also. I mean, I met
Oh
Indonesian
yeah.
English teachers
Oh my
who
God.
they'd studied English for a very long time. They were very good at English, but just in terms of communication, they'd not spoken to a native speaker probably for more than I would say an hour or two at a time in their whole entire lives.
Most
And having
at
a
the
native
most.
speaker where they can sit down and they can spend 2 years talking with them, or even a couple of weeks if you went to like an MGMP meeting or something like that where you can sit down and talk and work with other teachers. It was kind of a cool experience where you get to learn about Indonesia, you get to learn about the teachers, and I mean for them too, they get to learn about you and get to practice English, and you're basically there. I was basically there to just help these guys practice English and primarily just give them this is what a native speaker would say, or this is how a native speaker talks. And generally, the English in the textbooks is maybe not always going to be accurate, but it's still usable. But we can clean it up and we can make it a lot more natural for you, so you're more confident and the students are more confident with their English.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing I would say is just the lack of confidence from a lot of Indonesians. And
Mm.
if you have Indonesians that have studied English before, from private tutors or have studied abroad, they have a lot more confidence. Generally, people in the villages have a lot less just because they have a lot less exposure to using the language. And I'm sure that's probably changed now with social media and Instagram and YouTube basically being used by everybody in Indonesia now. But
Oh my
10
God.
years ago, it was so hard. I had such a shitty phone signal. I could barely watch it. I could barely watch a video on YouTube and I could barely make a WhatsApp call. It's changed so much in the last 10 years. And,
Really
hopefully this
has.
will help the kids learn more.
So yeah, so hopefully you teach some classes. In between classes, I would be in the teacher's kitchen, usually having some kopi. Some other teachers would usually there'd be like one empty classroom where they set up some table tennis. They're really into table tennis out there, man. They'd be going back and forth for a while. Uh, Unlike a lot of the world, smoking is still very prevalent in Indonesia, particularly among men. Pretty much everyone smokes. So you'd be in the teacher's kitchen. People would be just puffing away, and
This has changed a lot though.
it
So when I
has.
was down there this year in February, there were no smoking signs up everywhere.
Whoa!
And they're
No
trying to
smoking.
stop it, at least at school. Yeah, at school they're trying to limit smoke and in the teachers lounge and the canteens. And if you go out on the street or you go to a night market or something like that, people are still smoking like chimneys.
Well,
But
yeah,
at school, just absolutely no smoking at all. This was at my
that
school, so it might be at
that's progress.
other
That's
schools
progress
as well,
right
but it's
there.
definitely being rolled out, which is really cool and huge.
Yeah, because that was, oh my God, everyone was smoking all the time. Um, so yeah, so then you'd wind the day up. You'd go home. I'd usually go for a long walk in the rice field or through the village. Um, if you had you, as some people did, I never was able to get one going for a consistent period of time. If you had a less or a tutoring job, or you were teaching lessons outside of school, which some people did, you would do to that. You'd usually have dinner with the family. Uh, every day is different. It also depended. At the beginning of my stay, I was a little out of the village. Towards the end of my stay, I was in the middle of the village. There was always something going on. It just sort of depended on your mood and what you were willing to do, I guess.
Yeah. And a lot of it, and at least for me, if I wanted activity or I wanted something, all I had to do was walk outside of my host family's front door. And
Yeah.
you walk outside and you go, doesn't matter if you go to the left or you go to the right, and you walk 5 minutes up the street, you're going to see something or somebody's going to want to talk to you. And if you want to learn Indonesian, all you've got to do is just show up in the country and walk up the street, and people will want to talk to you. It's very, very easy to pick up the language just because people are extremely chatty and they want to see what's interesting to you and they want to see if you're interested in them. And I mean, you can be walking up the street and there can be a wedding, and people will say, "Oh, come over here to the wedding and grab a plate and eat some food." And you have no idea who these people are, but they'll still just invite you over there.
Oh
And
my
it's
God,
more
yeah.
just like, okay, this was a very typical. I can't tell you how many times I would either show up at school, we'd be there for 2 hours, and then we'd be going to a wedding, or we'd be going to Sunatan, which is a circumcision party for kids that are like probably 5 or 6, or we'd be going to, I don't
Funeral.
know, just some sort of other
Yeah.
cultural event like a Pesta Kuda Lumping. And you just go with all the other teachers, and this half the school would go as well, and just show up and be there and eat some food, have a cup of tea or coffee, and just, you know, embrace the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right though, and a lot of the experience was just you want to show up and you want to seize the moment, you want to seize the opportunity. Sometimes you didn't want to, sometimes you just wanted to stay home. That's okay too. But yeah,
Yep.
what Dave said is absolutely right. If you wanted an adventure, all you had to do was step outside your room. That's all
And
you had to
even
do.
half the time too, you could just be in your host family's house and somebody would come over, one of the
Oh yeah.
neighbors or somebody, and they would say, "Oh, we're going to, I don't know, we're going to go down to Chijulong or we're going to go on a walk and come with us." And they'll just basically take you out and you'll go on a walk with these guys somewhere or you'll get to do something really cool that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
And that
I
was,
mean,
I would say, one of the best parts about Peace Corps is like you
100%.
show up and you just let it flow and you let it come to you instead of you trying to force everything. Just let the thing work. Let the machine work because it will work. It's not going to work in a way that you want it to, but it's definitely going to work. And so much of it you've just got to, I guess, let go and go, okay, inshallah, like whatever happens is going to happen, and just leave it up to other people and the universe and God and everything else that everything's going to work out. And I would say most of the time it does, but that aspect of letting go is just so hard. It was for me at least.
Oh, I'm still struggling with it, I think. I mean, it's very hard, and it was really hard in the Peace Corps
Mhm.
because but what I would say is when you managed to do that, you would just have these wonderful Zen-like moments of your like everything's just flowing along, and I'm sort of just a part of the flow, and it's just all going to work out, and that would be wonderful. And often the moments of frustration were caused by your inability to do that, where you would be in a
Mhm.
situation you would go, no, I'm not giving up control. I want to, be the master of my fate. And I wouldn't say that was always a bad thing, but it normally led to problems, in my experience.
Well,
And
it's like that's definitely not the path of least resistance. The path of least resistance in Indonesia, at least from my experience, is you let stuff come to you. And if you
oh
try to will everything, can you do it? Yes, but it's going to be painful and it's going
yeah,
to be challenging and it's going to suck. And
yeah,
most of the time, the result that you want and the result that's going to come out from just letting stuff happen, it is so close to being the same thing that you just go, okay, next time I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to let it happen and I'm going to save all the frustration and pain and stress and just, it'll work out.
so I think on that very optimistic, I think appropriately optimistic note, we're going to let you all go today and say thank you so much for being with us here on the Fringe, just walking through day in the life of a Peace Corps volunteer.
Yep. And too, if you guys have more questions about Peace Corps, reach out to me, reach out to Gavin, and note that our experiences are our unique personal experiences. So our group had, I think, 73 people swear in. Every single person had a different experience. So if you would talk to them and you would talk to us, you'd hear 73 or 74 different things from the guy who was in
Like
training and left.
completely different.
But you've got to take everything that you hear from Peace Corps volunteers with a grain of salt. And it really is. It's an awesome experience. It's life changing. And if you're considering doing it, reach out and I'll be glad to help you however I can.
Awesome. Okay. Talk soon, man.
All right. Sampai jumpa.
Sampai jumpa lagi.